Sure. Sounds like sound is on the comment.
Yeah.
I'm going to have you do that, yeah. So good evening, everyone. I want to welcome everyone to this evening's building subcommittee meeting. I'm going to, before we have public comment, I just want to turn it over to Mike Waterman for him to introduce some of the individuals that are on the table this evening, and then I'll turn it over to public comment, which I believe there may be a list floating around somewhere. So, Mike?
So I'll start by introducing Joe Costa, who is the architect on the project. I'll let him introduce the team he has with him here today.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Waterman. I have just a core group with me tonight. Of course, we have a much larger group of men and women who are working on this project, and you're going to get to see them as we progress this design. But tonight, I have with me Tina Greco, who's the project manager. At the end of the table is Mike Berger, our design principal, and also to my left is Chris Radner from Traverse. She's a landscape architect. So you've got 3 architects and 1 landscape architect. And I admit that that's really going to be a focus of tonight's discussion.
Thank you. And then we also have Inga Knox from Jacobs. And if you have anyone here with you,
I thought I did. See.
Oh, they ran it.
I think they ran.
And then everyone else you see here is members of the building subcommittee, Dr. Plata as superintendent and myself as manager. We co-chair the building subcommittee. So whoever the manager or the superintendent would be, they would automatically co-chair this subcommittee. And with that, I will attempt to get the sheet for public comment. Do we have that somewhere?
It's right on the
Thank
podium.
And if when you come up, I would ask that if you could do your best to keep it within 3 minutes, I would appreciate that. And if you could give your name and address, that would also be very helpful as well. Richard Welch.
I guess it's good evening. So, Richard Welch, 8 Arrow Lane, North Kingstown. For those of you who do not know me, I just want to let you understand where I come from. I served on the school committee for 4 years, and part of that I was chairman. I've been on the town council for 3 terms. One of those terms was as president of the town council. I served on the high school building committee for 3.5 years, which obviously resulted in us having a new high school. And I've been on asset management and the building committee for the school department for a great number of years. So I have a lot of background that I speak from. Okay, it's not hearsay, it's actuality. First thing I will say is that when we did the high school, we worked with the architect, and the architect held his fee until the bond issue was passed. We paid him nothing until that point. Okay, you're looking for $1.7 million with no risk to the architect, only to the taxpayers. I don't agree with that. Let the architect have some skin in the game. The site that you have supposedly chosen at Quidnesset Elementary, I will tell you that we have had nothing but problems over there because of the high water table. We've had moisture coming up through the concrete floor, which ruined the floor covering and allowed the school to have a problem with mildew and black mold. Spent a lot of money over there. That high water table over there is indicative of the neighborhood. And if you had been here, probably 30, 40 years ago, you would also know that that whole neighborhood had a problem with high water table, and they had to redo many of the septic systems over there, and that's the reason why that school and 2 houses are tied into the base sewer system. It's because of that high water table. I disagree with you putting it over there, putting that school in a residential neighborhood, bringing all that traffic with the buses and families and the staff. It's almost the same exact enrollment as the high school, less the students that drive. And you're gonna bury it inside a residential neighborhood. That's a great disservice to that neighborhood. That will devalue those properties, along with give them more problems with the water, because when you build a building over there the size of this building, it's gonna hydraulically raise the water table higher than it is right now. The other thing I'd like to make sure that people were aware of, that it appears that a typical house is gonna add about $1,000 a year to their tax bill. And over the period of the bond issue, some 30 years, that's $30,000 plus for a typical household in North Kingstown. That's a lot of money. I think you all need to look at other options. I disagree with those people that say that Wickford Middle School needs to be torn down. It's old. It's probably the best building that we own in town. So it's old. It's a funny thing that the Wickford Middle School kids have probably been the highest performing for years in town. Education is not bricks and mortar. Thank you.
Thank you. Francis Slade.
Good evening, my name is Francis Slade. I live at 30 Linwood Drive, North Kingstown. This past week, I attended the Restoration Advisory Board meeting of the Naval Construction Battalion in Davisville Center. At that meeting, there was representatives from BRAC, which is the cleanup team, and their representative, Mr. Dave Bonney, from BRAC Environmental Coordinator, Derek Pinkham, Remedial Project Manager, Carol Keating, EPA Boston, and Nicholas Nunes, DEM Rhode Island. At that meeting, we discussed issues of the water table, the neighborhood itself, and homes that many still have to run a sump pump in. We discussed the water table throughout the area, and we also included in our discussion the stream that runs through the school property, which also runs through our neighborhood. The stream is contaminated. After speaking with the BRAC team for remedial project manager, they are going to take over the Army Corps of Engineers work in our neighborhood, because they are going to look for the source of the contamination in that stream. It is not coming from the military base. The stream doesn't run that way. The stream is something very local, where the problem is that this contamination is on the school property and in our neighborhood. So now the government is going to step in and find the source of that contamination. Also, I spoke with DEM. DEM has already looked at the entire neighborhood for water tables. You're not just going to affect our immediate neighborhood raising the water table. This situation, this water table, is going to also affect down to Pine River, which is a heck of a big distance between the two housing development areas. Therefore, you probably also be bringing more water to the homes down in the Pine River area, also changing the water table up in our neighborhood. A lot came out the other day. We also had a problem with Green RI digging on the Quonset side along the fields that the children play on. We, in the neighborhood, some of the neighbors received and got obnoxious smelling gas all in their properties from over there. They said that that probably comes from them digging over there, changing a flume, and diverting that smell out to the neighborhood. They're also going to look into that because naturally it's going to affect the whole neighborhood if it's a problem over there. I learned an awful lot. Our town council president was there. He also learned a lot. And I think a lot of investigation needs to be done. And I know that DEM is on this now. I know that the environmental committee for Davisville Restoration Committee is on it. And the wetlands have already been informed. I want to know if you have gotten a number from DEM yet to start and do any environmental impact for that area. Can anybody answer that?
So just for clarification, and I don't want to put Perkins Eastman on the spot, but I will. Just for clarification, during public comment, we try not to involve Q&A, but I don't want you to ask a question and know an answer. So for clarification, this building subcommittee acted on a report from a consultant that was hired by the previous school committee. This building subcommittee's only role at that point was to make a recommendation to the school committee. We had three choices. Choice number one was the site of Quinnes Elementary School for 6th, 7th, and 8th. Choice number two was the site of Quinnes Elementary School for 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. Choice number three was status quo. There were many of us, or some of us at that meeting, that expressed some concern that we didn't have any other options on the table. That why weren't other sites part of our choice? That we could have more of a choice than just those three options. And we were advised that the consultant felt that was the only site in town. And I'm not saying we all agree with that person. Only site in town. And so at that point, we had to make a decision whether we go status quo, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, or 6th, 7th, and 8th. And again, there were some on this committee who expressed some disappointment on that. And I want to be clear, it's in the minutes. So this building committee has a very limited role. We do not handle curriculum. We do not handle redistricting. And in this case, we did not handle which is the best site. We were given three options, and we had to choose one in order to meet the bonus points set by the state of Rhode Island. To that end, as much as I don't want to get into Q&A, you can either answer that question, if you have the answer, by the way, during your presentation, or if you wanted to answer that now, or if you don't have an answer, we would get back to Mrs. Slade, whatever's good for you.
Well, I think we can touch upon some of that during our presentation, and what we can do is also follow up with written response, if that works for you.
So then what I'd recommend, if this is okay, is that let them try to cover that during the presentation, assuming you're here for the entire evening, we hope you are. After our meeting, it doesn't look like a long meeting, feel free to stay, and I'm sure they would be more than happy to answer a direct follow-up question on your behalf, if that's okay.
Fine.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Robert Jones?
Robert Jones, 63 Pheasant Run. Since you brought it up, Ralph, there was a fourth option. In 2019, the school committee and town council talked about a 7 and 8 model and a K-6 model that modernized two schools, not one, that solved the Title I issue, that actually reduced the footprint, and actually covered all the needs on the Jacobs report. So I don't know what happened. There's some institutional memory that I think this school committee doesn't lean on either its own member that's been on for 6-7 years or other people that they could lean on. They seem to use the excuse that they're new for just about everything that doesn't occur or is last minute or fails to get done. So there was a fourth option that could have been addressed. And since you brought up the master plan with the Community Engagement Forum almost universally rejected the 5 to 8 model. And yet that wasn't considered. There seems to be a rush to get to a bonus. Well, it would be nice if someone actually explained, now that 16,740 is passed in the FY24, what bonuses you actually are chasing, because there's still a 5% bonus, even if you wait a little bit. You're floating a bond at the highest interest rates that's gonna be seen in 20 years. Waiting is not going to cost you more, because when rates fall, like they eventually will in a couple of years, you follow the Fed model of sort of economic activity, right? That's $2 million basically saved for every interest point shaved off. Yes, the town could refinance the bonds, but guess what? You're not gonna get the pay-go money either. That's almost all spent as well. So this point that you had to make a decision is kind of ludicrous to look at members of the public, especially since, one, you can't answer the question of where the Title I school is going to be. It costs millions of dollars if we don't have a Title I school. You can't even give an honest answer to say, we have some scenarios, if our vision occurs of, is DMS still open? Is DMS become an elementary school? Where is the admin building going to go? And the other solution...
Those are not questions for the building subcommittee.
Well,
I
Rob,
respect
I'm
those
just going to
questions.
say, I respectfully disagree that you have a role to push the school committee to advise them that you made a recommendation, these are the implications that the school committee needs to address. You have 2 members of the school committee on here.
I understand that, but I truly respect your analogy here, more than you can imagine. However, the building subcommittee has a very distinct role. We are giving a recommendation and we are supposed to focus on the building. Which direction do we want to go? And that's what we did. We have no
Correct, Rob, my
jurisdiction.
point is you don't have to answer the questions. I think you have an obligation to say, based on our recommendation, here's the other stuff. But let me just, since I don't want to talk forever,
Sure.
my other points. So you are the building subcommittee. How are you addressing the other $40 million of needs in the other buildings? I think you were going to tell the public that, one, we hope that we inflated the bond estimate so there'll be money left over. How ludicrous does that sound to the public? Or 2, we hope that it comes in under budget, which leads to the same issues we had with the high school that years later we're pouring millions of dollars into fix. Honestly, you owe the community a total solution to the Jacobs Report deficiencies, not to pour money into one building. And on the further note, you have $2 million sitting in the nutrition fund surplus. Are we going to modernize the cafeteria equipment? It's a perfect opportunity to do it. So please get with your role. I think you need to do a little self-reflection and say, are we just about a new middle school, or are we about the holistic infrastructure of the school district? Because it sure sounds like all you did was rush to hopefully get something like 15, 20, whatever bonus, that you can't even explain to the public what exactly bonuses they are. When I look at the FCIs, Whitford Middle's only 57 in the Jacobs report, unless there's a more current one, right? The FCI says over 65. None of those buildings are under 60% utilization yet. So could you explain to the public exactly which bonuses you're chasing? Because it sure sounds like you added 5th grade because you're chasing 5%, which is an awful thing to do to the community. Why don't you take a step back and go, we have a plan that addresses the whole needs. Forget about if you're chasing, I know it's easy to say I'm chasing 5 or 10% of 170 million. I understand, it's not chump change. But neither is rushing a project to get something done that the community here is going, basically, we don't want. We don't want it there. We don't want it that big. You definitely have an obligation in your stage 2 application to cost out the 7 to 8 model. It's a very good model. It's sad that it got lost because of the COVID stuff, and I don't know why it wasn't brought up here as part of the recommendations.
It
But
was.
you honestly should have.
It was. I brought it up. It
Well,
was.
then you honestly really didn't cost it out or discuss it in depth, because it was a very viable alternative, and I'll tell you, you only have to look to Johnson to go, great plans get derailed pretty quickly. So you need fallback options, because honestly, who knows what's going to happen? But I think when the public gets to hear that really you're pushing a plan that's not well thought out yet, I don't know if it's going to pass.
I saw some people walk in at the end, so I didn't want to not have them have the opportunities. Anyone else who wants to say a few words? Public comment. Okay. I saw some people in this was already taken away, so I wanted to make sure if someone wasn't not given that right, so. Excellent. Next order of business is to approve the minutes from the May 31st, 2023 meeting. There's a motion in order to approve those minutes. Thank you. Second?
I have copies.
All in favor?
I'll second, but I have a comment.
Please.
I think there's a few people listed as present that weren't present, but,
I was not there, and I missed
Okay,
it.
we should correct that then.
We'll make a correction.
also, there's a statement under the NK School Middle School project update, and I'll read the sentence to you, and I think it's incorrect. The current status of the project was discussed, which involves the demolition of one middle school and one high school in Hamilton. I don't understand what that means. I don't think there's any discussion of a high school demolition, and Hamilton is not included in anything.
So I'm gonna ask that we, if we could, Bob, could you rescind your motion to accept the minutes?
Yes, I'll rescind my.
Thank you. If there should be a motion to defer action on this, that way we can correct the minutes. Is there a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. So if we could correct those minutes, and we'll have them back for the next meeting. Thank you, I appreciate that. Next item is an update on the North Kingstown Middle School project. There's 4 sub-items. We'll start with the update on the architect contract approval. Yes, please.
So, at the school committee meeting, the school committee discussed the funding for the Eastman contract and agreed to, and decided to, request from the town council, a funding source for this. Town council met with the school committee / school department at their most recent meeting, and I think it's on the agenda for this upcoming Tuesday, Monday night.
I believe it is, yes. And I know there's been dialogue between the council and the school committee regarding this, so whatever dialogue that's taking place between the president and the chair. And so I believe that will be on Monday night.
Okay, perfect.
That's my understanding. I don't know if they resolved it, but it should be on Monday night. The next one is project, oh, please,
I
thank
have
you.
a couple of questions.
Absolutely. Sorry.
Since that meeting, I think it's become more clear that the deadline that was previously the 31st of December has been moved to the 30th of June for next year.
That is correct.
That's welcome in a way because it takes some of the pressure off on the so-called rushing that's going on.
Yes.
And I want to know if that might have any impact on how we assess the contract. And I'd be interested in getting a response from Mr. Costa, if you could, about whether or not that's something that has some impact or Inga. I'm not sure which of you would be able to address that. And then, Mr. Welch has appeared frequently at meetings, raises this question about fee deferral and having so-called skin in the game. I'd like to have a response from you about how you view that and whether or not that's a practice that your organization has ever engaged in.
May I just point out one thing before we get the answer from them? The other part, in addition to the extension to June 30th, it is stated that by November 7th, we must conduct a special election. So a lot of the work that we're doing now, we would still need to do in order to have enough information for the public to make an informed decision.
I understand what you're saying.
But just to piggyback on the good point that he's making is that, yes, we do need some work for the bond proposal referendum, but we may not necessarily need the full scope in order to go out to bid the day after the bond if we can delay the stage 2. Because my understanding is that there's also an opportunity stage 2 in February. I'm going by, I don't have anything to back this up. My understanding is that there is an opportunity for stage 2 after the fact. So all the work that we thought we needed to do to get stage 2 done by September 15th, bond by November, and the day after get the RFP or RFQ out there so we can have a signed document by December 30th, is now pushed to June 30th. So I think there may be an opportunity for us to delay some of this. That's not confirmed, but I believe that's the case.
So I
I'm
think,
going by experience. So.
sure, I think the only issue with that would be is there's a lot of questions regarding traffic and water, environmental. That's what's required for stage 2. So if we were to delay that until after the bond, people would be making a decision without having the results of those studies.
Makes sense.
So there is there is a downside to also delaying it, is because then you don't, what we've heard from public comment as far as issues around the site, we still don't have those answers.
Yep, makes sense. So,
But I'll defer.
yeah, definitely, I don't know how you want to address those
Yeah,
questions.
I'll take the first question. Mike, I agree 100%. The more information that we have prior to the bond resolution, that means our cost estimates are that much more accurate, right? But what we don't want to do is put out a bonding resolution and then have to amend it because we discovered something about, water or whatever it is. So that's important that we get as much of that done prior to the referendum as we possibly can. And the second question is, we typically don't work for free. We do have to pay our consultants, and they typically don't work for free. It's not Perkins Eastman that's doing this unilaterally. We have a long list of consultants and professionals that are really looking at this project, and the stack of documentation, the amount of design work that has to be done to the criteria of stage 2 is voluminous. And so we could not actually take the project on without a fee. We just wouldn't be able to do that.
The situation that Mr. Welch referred to, and he's talking about our high school, which was, and I don't know, I'm assuming that he was accurate in what he said. Have you ever heard of a situation where an architect agrees to take on a project on so-called spec or contingency?
Personally, not to this level of documentation that's really necessary for stage 2 submission. We have not seen that. Now, I've seen architects take assignments with thumbnail sketches that are used for referendum, and if they pass, then the project proceeds. But the stack of documentation, the amount of hours and work that has to be done on it, it's incredible. When you see this, you'll understand what it means to do a stage 2. These are highly detailed drawings. Materials are set. The structure is defined. The site, as well as surface, undersurface, the drainage, all that kind of stuff that's going to influence what this building costs and what the money is needed to build this building is going to be well defined. You won't have to go back ever for a second referendum with this information.
To add to Joe's comment, that the budget that's set at stage 2 is the budget that cannot be exceeded after, right? So when we set that number and we get the MOA from RIDE, that is that you can go below, of course, you can value down, but you cannot go over. And to do that, you need a cost estimate. To get a cost estimate, you need the level of detail that Joe Costa is talking about, because if we don't have that detail, we can either inflate the budget so high that we just and hope for the best, so to speak, right, which is inappropriate to do, or we can assume certain things, and then once we actually design the building after, it will not be accurate, and then we are risking not to be over budget. If we are over budget, we cannot go back to RIDE and say, I'm sorry, our building is over. RIDE will not give us more money. So that is why stage 2 is set the way it is, to actually show that we did due diligence and the schematic design is estimated with an estimator, a third-party estimator, and then that budget is, with contingencies, however, it is set at a comfortable level so that the building can be built. That explains things. Hence the level of documents that are required.
Any other questions? Okay. The next item is the project update presentation.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. It's good to be here tonight. So really, for the first time, we're going to be talking about the programming, and we're going to also talk about the site and what the realities of this site are, as well as some initial early concept designs. And for tonight, we're going to show really an A and a B option. Those are very preliminary, and the design team will talk about what those plans are about, and then we'll answer any questions that you have about the item. It is a lot of information that we're going to be giving you, so we're gonna try to take our time and do it as slowly as we possibly can, and then, we'll give you plenty of time to talk to it. So I'm gonna ask Tina to really talk about the agenda, and then we can get right into the programming and some of the design analysis.
Okay, great, thank you. So just as a quick overview of where we are, some of the different activities, we started working on this project back in April. There's, over a dozen consultants that are working with this Perkins Eastman design team for this project. We, in the recent weeks, we've been doing we have a consultant, Hare, that's been working on the Phase 1 ESA, which is an environmental site assessment, where they look for public records of any information on the site. We'll certainly want to ask Mrs. Slate for the information that you shared today. The traffic study, you may have seen some of the traffic. We have the VHB as the consultant for a traffic study. They've been out at different intersections collecting data and observations. They were at the Wickford Middle School and the Davisville Middle School, also doing some site analysis there. That is ongoing. We've also had Hare work on the wetlands. So they've been out at the site and they've been doing what is called flagging the wetlands. They identify where the wetlands are, they put stakes in the ground, they have some kind of connection to the GIS system, and then they map it out. That map, when Mike and Chris start to talk about the preliminary conceptual designs for the site, you'll see that they're taking those wetlands into consideration. And then the next item here, survey and geotechnical. We will be having a site survey done of the property. That's happening in the next 2 weeks or so. And then geotechnical is scheduled for mid-July. So once all that information, so there's the field work that's involved with each of those, and then we get the information from that field work. And that's just listing a few of those activities. There's many other things going on, and of course you'll see some of that when we move forward. Joe's going to be talking about the next item on the agenda is programming. Joe's going to be talking about the programming meetings that we held. I see many familiar faces in here today. We spent many hours that were actually engaging, speaking to people about staff and administrators about what this program needs to be, and Joe's going to go into that. And then site analysis and preliminary concepts, as I mentioned, Mike and Chris are going to talk about that. Then we'll go back to Inga, who will give us an OPM update, and then we have questions and answers. And that's kind of what we're about to go into.
Thank you, Tina. So programming is really the initial phase of thinking about your new school. So this is sort of a unique situation where two middle schools are coming together to create a new middle school, and we're taking fifth graders and moving them into this middle school environment. So it is really a new approach for your community and how that actually works together, and the kinds of spaces that are going to be in that building, the relationships with those spaces, how things are going to be organized, are all things that we've spoken with educators, the administrators, leadership, teachers, and we had quite an in-depth discussion. All of our programming discussions really start with your school department mission, which is to educate our students to become intellectually active adults, to inspire them, very important, and to reach individual excellence and to challenge them to become responsible members of society. So everything that we talk about, everything that we do is always focused on the major mission of the school department. Now we established some goals, and there were a lot more that were discussed, and we'll have those in our final report. But some of the things that we really talked about and really came up to the top was creating small learning communities, right? There was always a concern that a 1,200 student building would feel very large and kids would get lost in it. And so a way of handling it is to actually design or to create a program that starts identifying small learning communities where students would have a small school feeling within a larger facility with the amenities that go with a large school. We also talked about flexible learning studios. the idea that this school is going to last many generations, and so we know that education, the way it's delivered will change. And what we wanted to do is have some flexible planning within our building such that as the curriculum evolves and changes, so too can the building accommodate those changes without serious reconstruction or tearing down parts of the building. We also talked about small group instruction areas, and that is areas that are outside of a typical academic space where the communication and small group, whether it's peer-to-peer or teacher-to student, can happen outside of a traditional learning classroom setting. We also talked about providing the larger learning commons where larger groups would come together. For example, the Media Center or the Technology or the Innovation Center or the auditorium, some of those other big spaces. One of the things we talked about is the Innovation Center, which is the project-based instruction area that really is starting to evolve from the traditional library or robotics lab. And so the spaces are really going to be designed for flexibility, connectivity, choice, movement, and hands-on multimodal learning. Really a 21st century program is what we're looking for. So some of the discussions, right? So we spent a lot of time talking about the core classrooms and team teaching. And Mike is going to show some very preliminary layouts where we start developing these small learning centers or these neighborhoods. We spent a lot of time talking about the 5th grade and what that transition means going from elementary school to a middle school setting. And what was interesting about that is ultimately the 5th grade students are not going to be treated as elementary school students nor middle school, but really as kind of a transitional arrangement of teaming in classrooms. And I'll show you what that's going to look like in a minute. Talked about the self-contained neighborhood and small learning community. That's important because of this large school. We also talked about dedicated instructional areas. In other words, we don't want to teach music in a standard classroom or art in a standard classroom or language in a standard classroom. What we want to do is have spaces that are dedicated for those curriculums. So a true art room, a true music room, true choral room, et cetera, et cetera. Spent a lot of time talking about the cafeteria, and this particular program assumes 4 lunch waves, 1 per grade, so that we're not having the older and the younger children having lunch at the same time. But each group, each grade would have its own lunch wave in a comfortable, modern setting. And we also had some conversations about what the future menu is and how food is going to be prepared and served and presented, and nutrition that's going to be provided at this particular school. And these are all sort of forward-thinking ways of treating this very important function in a new middle school. Special education, of course, very important, and one of the things that you'll see in our diagrams is that each neighborhood is almost self-contained, so it does have components of special ed within each neighborhood, but that there's also additional special ed spaces that are self-contained and are accessible from all of the grades. Very important consideration. I mentioned the Media Center and Technology Innovation Center. That is really sort of a new way of looking at what media centers are and how technology and robotics and hands-on project-based learning can actually occur in those spaces. And it's often a space that's celebrated within the floor plan, often prominently part of our plan, and so it generates excitement and visual connection for students. Talked about art and music instruction. And we also talked about the auditorium, whether or not we would want to include a sloped floor auditorium, and it was decided that it would be appropriate for a school of this magnitude to have a sloped floor auditorium. The seat number that we're currently designing to is about 600, so about half of the population would be able to fit in a true sloped floor auditorium with a reasonably sized performance stage. It's not quite the high school, but it's certainly deep enough and wide enough to have a wide variety of performances, whether they be musical or dramatic, or the space is also designed for a wide variety of other venues, including the opportunity of bringing outside talent to have performances. And of course, the space itself can also be used as additional practice area for music or for choral presentations or practice. It's going to be very exciting to have an accessible auditorium that's equipped with modern lighting and sound equipment, and really does set up the students for an even better experience when they get to the high school, which is really quite a nice auditorium. We also spent a lot of time talking about physical education, and the size of this particular gym is really quite large. We designed it such that it could actually serve 2 classes on each side with a divider curtain. It's 1,200 students, so we have to bring a lot of students through the PE class. But we also have a second room, which is a movement and fitness room. It's not full of equipment. It is really a room that's designed for dance or yoga or wrestling or stretching or a number of other functions as the school sees fit. But it is really a flexible space. It is part of the physical education program, along with some locker rooms and changing rooms and things like that, stuff that you normally see in a middle school setting. We talked a lot about administration and how administration and guidance would occupy kind of the central part of the school, and the number of administrators and where they will be in the building, and also how there will be some other administrative spaces elsewhere in the building. The health and wellness suite was also another area of a lot of discussion, understanding that today's nurses stations are not what they were 10, 15, 20 years ago, that they're really important functions in a school where students visit the nurse for maintenance medicines or for counseling or for a large number of other reasons. It's just a very important component to a well-functioning middle school. And then last but not least, we spent some time talking about the building maintenance and sustainability and energy efficiency. And one of the things that we certainly want to try to achieve in this building would be a net zero energy building if we can. We do have some challenges associated with that, but all of our conversations internally and externally has been to try to maximize our ability to reduce the building's energy cost and reduce its carbon footprint to as little as we possibly can, hopefully to zero, and give you a building that's going to basically have no energy bill at the end of the year, which we think is exciting. Next slide. So we like diagrams, so these particular boxes, we call them chiplets, if you remember the old chewing gum. But what they do is they help us understand what the program is built from. Generally, the academic general classrooms for this building would be about 48 rooms, okay? And it's really going to be organized by grade. The 5th grade being unique, and I'll explain that in a second. The 6th, 7th, and 8th grade being very similar and very important, interchangeable. So when we design our building, if you want to take the 6th grade and move them to a different wing or a different level, the administrators can do that very easily because the rooms themselves are very consistent and they're also interchangeable. So the way we have it organized is the 5th grade I mentioned is that transition. So it's neither elementary nor it's middle, but it's actually made up of a team consisting of 2 rooms. The first room would be a standard classroom, which would be for social studies and for English. And the second room would be a science-sized room, which would be appropriate for math and science. Now, if you can imagine, the science room is a middle school science room with tables associated with that function, with access to lab equipment if necessary, experimental equipment, things like that. Really, almost a middle school experience at the 5th grade, and that's really a terrific way of doing it. So we actually have 6 of those making up our 12 classrooms. The typical 6th, 7th, and 8th grade is made up of 3 teams in each grade, consisting of 3 standard rooms plus 1 science room. And so that's repeated 3 times, and that's how we get to our 48 classrooms. So a very simple arrangement, but what it does do is it begins to form these neighborhoods where students spend a great deal of their time in that setting, like a small school setting, and then they only leave that to go to the specials, like for lunch or gym or art or music or some of the other things that are happening in the building. I should mention that the square footage of our typical classroom is about 850 square feet. And just for reference, the Wigford School is around 674 square feet, and Davisville is about 730 square foot. So the typical classroom, and we've spent a lot of time talking about how they're equipped and the flexibility and all that stuff. We're not going to present that tonight, but the room that we're talking about is about 850 square foot, which gives the teachers and students a little bit more elbow room and a little bit more flexibility, both for equipment and furniture and arrangements of the space. So, if you add up all, next slide. If you add up all of the rooms, all the academic spaces, including world language and all the others, you end up with about 53,100 net square feet, which is about 44% of the total net area of this school. So almost half of the area of this building is devoted to spaces where teachers and students are actively learning. Next one. So we talked about the blue boxes, the blue chiclets. Well, there's a lot of other stuff in this building. We don't really have the time tonight to go through every one of them, but you see here the variety of sizes of spaces, how they're grouped together, how the relative size. And what's going to happen in a few minutes, you're going to see how these spaces come together on a site in a kind of a working, functional middle school design, which is going to be pretty amazing, and I think you're going to really enjoy that part of the presentation. So here's the sum of the space in my connection. As I mentioned, 55% is academic. So if you add up all of those little chiclet boxes, we have about 120,400 square foot net area. We do have a net to gross multiplier, and what that is, in case you're not familiar with it, the 120,000 square foot is actually the inside surface. So for example, this room is what, like 968, something like that?
I think it's 980.
980. So if you imagine this room is 980 square feet, well, to get to this room, you have to go down a corridor, right? Well, that corridor is part of that net to gross multiplier. And in a school of this size, we typically see as a starting point about 1.5. So it's not just the corridor, it's the walls, it's stairs, it's elevators, it's elevator shafts, it's all that stuff that's not spaced necessarily for teaching, but it makes part of the overall gross square footage. And right now, our design square footage is just slightly over 180,000 square foot, which is very close to the RFP target that we were looking at when we first looked at this particular job. So I think we're doing pretty good. Obviously we want to make the building as tight as we possibly can. It will be a function of how it sits on the site, how the entrances work, what we're required for security and all those kinds of things. That will influence the final number. As we develop the designs, we'll continue to update that number. So as the designs tighten up, we'll report the net area, we'll report the net to gross multiplier, the actual and the gross area, because that ultimately is going to impact what this building is going to cost. Now, the other component of the program, besides all those little chiclet boxes, are the exterior site improvements. And they consist of a number of things, which the design team is going to talk about in a couple minutes. Of course, there's things like ball fields, multi-purpose fields, and the little boxes on the lower left-hand corner it's a very important component, and that is parking, right? So we have to provide space for parents and staff. We don't have to provide any parking for students at this school, because they're not driving yet, thank God. And we also have to provide space for buses, right? You know, the district has to provide busing to this particular facility. The thing that looks like a snake is actually a representation of the queuing line typically that we'll see for parents. Many parents are going to want to drive their students to the site, and we need a place and a method to stack up the parents waiting to pick up. Drop-off is not an issue because they come and go, but in the afternoon, stacking is something that we have to accommodate, and we typically want to accommodate the stacking on our property. We do not want that stacking to be in the neighborhood, interrupting traffic or disrupting, neighborhood use. We want those stacks to be on the campus, so to speak. So we work very hard to figure out, drop-off lanes, loops, and traffic circulation. And that is a big part of any school design that we put together. The other little squigglies at the bottom are, we have a beautiful site. You'll see in a couple of minutes, much of the site will remain pretty much the way it looks like today because of the limitations of where we can build. We do feel that there will be an opportunity for trails. We do think that there will be opportunities for outdoor learning, and whether that is an amphitheater, a garden, a place where students can do outdoor work, sketching, drawing, or playing music, whatever it may be. We do think that there's going to be some fantastic opportunities to observe the natural setting. There's going to be lots of science opportunities. We do have some, ecology on the site that we want the students to become familiar with. And there's also some opportunities for amphitheater or some kind of an outdoor presentation area. Because this is such a beautiful site, we want to try to open up the building to the students, open up the building to the site so that students can really enjoy the setting. And that's the quantities. And right now we're going to talk about the site. Okay, Mike. Chris, you wanna start?
Sure. Yep. So this is the existing property where the existing Quidnessa Elementary School is right now. We're just showing kind of a broader site analysis of the surroundings. What's in pink, as you all well know, is commercial industrial with medium density neighborhoods in these purple pockets or blue pockets, and then low density housing or woodlands in this green and yellow. The roads, obviously we know Route 1 running north-south. North on this map is generally at the top of the page. In addition to this main Route 1, we have Newcomb Road, which is a secondary road that kind of runs through the site and connects with Potter and Fletcher. So we see parents and buses coming to the site from Route 1 to the west along Newcomb and up Mark Drive, existing conditions, and then or coming from Potter, Fletcher at the northeast, coming down Newcomb in this direction. Got it. This is zooming into the actual property, so you can see the property boundaries in white around all four sides. We have Mark Drive right here coming into the existing Quidnessa Elementary School, and then we have Linwood Drive, which dead ends just outside the property. I'm going to carefully explain all of the restrictions that we have on this site. We have areas of wetland, which also includes Mill Creek in this darker blue shade, and that occurs kind of right in the middle of the site of the entire property, but really just west of the existing elementary school. We have a small pocket of wetland along the eastern boundary, and we have a larger wetland along the western property line that continues off the property site. What we have as far as buffers is this area in green is an area of buffer where we should not be doing any kind of site development or grading. That includes like side slopes to parking lots and pavements, so just parking lots and roadways. The area in yellow is a restricted area. We can't do any building structures within that yellow zone. The kind of dashed yellow pink line that occurs kind of in these two areas, and then again it occurs over here kind of lightly. Those are just kind of invisible lines that are jurisdictional zones, which basically means that Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management has to review whatever is done with this site. So it's not a boundary where we can't build on, it just means that they have review. The only caveat to these buffers that I'll explain is within a buffer, when there's already previous development happening, such as a building or a parking lot, we are allowed to work within that already paved surface. So that happens down here where the circulation for the existing elementary school occurs, and it happens where there's parking up along the side of the school. That's already parking lot, so we are able to use that area. We just can't encroach any closer to the wetlands. We also have solar orientation, which Mike will talk a little bit more about in terms of the classroom orientation, but basically the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and then we have winter where the sun is lower in the sky, and then summer where the sun is higher in the sky. This helps us with kind of our building design. And then we have northwest prevailing winds, southwest summer winds, and I think I covered everything. There is a potential vernal pool over in this corner. It'll have its own set of buffers, but it doesn't really impact what we're doing on the site because it's over in the corner and we wouldn't be developing over there anyway. The next one is we were asked to do some test fits to understand what it would look like if we put a full-size baseball field on the site or a track and field on the site. We're showing this over top of where the existing elementary school is. You can see it takes up a lot of real estate. It's going into the buffer zones, and this doesn't include even any kind of parking or circulation or grading. So we wanted to show this in order to have you see that these test fits don't work in our opinion, and we just wanted to be able to explain that. The next set of test fits is looking at softball and Little League with, they both are obviously smaller than a baseball field. It's about a 200-foot outfield area, and then a multi-use, just a multi-use field. During the program meetings, when we talked with the physical education staff, just open field space was what we heard that was asked for, but we also haven't had discussions with any kind of other town rec league or anything like that. So we're just taking some preliminary test fits here overall. And then this one is showing a multi-purpose field with two softball or Little League size fields overlaid. It's not a perfect fit. There's still some shuffling we need to do. The considerations with this is even though soccer is played in the fall and ball is played in the spring, there's if you're using a regular natural turf surface, you've got that lip where it changes to an infield mix. That's a safety concern, and there's also the plates that are and the pitcher's rubber that's in the way. If there's a discussion in the future to go to all synthetic turf, you're going to have to consider what those pitching mounds are doing, whether they're portable, and you'll also have the plates to deal with. So there's considerations no matter what you do with overlaying multiple uses in the same space, and we just wanted to point that out.
Okay.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, now we're gonna take a look at two preliminary building and site layout options. First of all, this is kind of the most exciting part of the project. Coming in here, we learned a significant amount from the programming meetings and sessions with the educators and staff, which is great, learning adjacencies. Also learning about the site and limitations on the site and opportunities on the site and how those come together. And this is really a first pass at that. So we're going to share two options today. And after we present them both, we'd love to have a discussion. It would be great to get some feedback on an option, or we need to continue looking at a third option. But within these options, we will continue to design and refine and adjust adjacencies, maximize efficiency, as Joe was talking about. So we still have months of design to go. So these are really a first pass to scale, taking a look at where we are. So when we design, we love to share these three guiding principles. Inspire. It is an absolutely fantastic site, and it's great that a lot of it is areas that we can't touch, so it's going to remain wooded, especially for middle school age students. I think it's kind of a magical place. We'll talk a bit about trying to maintain site buffers with trees on the site, but the architecture should be inspiring as well. So we'll take cues from the site, that visual connection, a physical connection, comfort. The school should be comfortable. Acoustics. We'll talk about mechanicals down the road, mechanical systems. We'll talk about daylighting, but it should feel safe as well. So safety is probably at the top of the list, and you'll see a lot of the planning decisions that are made up front are kind of invisible decisions that are made behind the scenes, which safety plays a major role of where classrooms are located, how we can secure down certain parts of the wing, private versus public portions of the school, which we'll get into, and there'll be numbers of meetings with administration and first responders as we move along. And adapt. We're designing a school now that'll be still hopefully functioning very well 50 years from now. So how can we design spaces that are designed for now, technology and teaching moves, but also in the future as well. So we're going to jump from this into kind of a site plan so you see how it comes together, and then we'll jump back into the school as a whole. But I think it's important to understand what the academic classrooms look like. You're going to see these wings on the site plan, and what they represent. Each wing will represent a classroom neighborhood. Joe went through and discussed in the programming what's contained basically on the left-hand corner. These are all the chiclets, the kit of parts. All these spaces are associated to a certain grade. So this wing right here, a single story, would contain either 6th, 7th, or 8th grade. They'll have a connection on the right-hand side, this arrow right here, which will plug into a main corridor, which we're calling Main Street, which is a public corridor which connects these academic wings to the rest of the school, to your gymnasium, to your music, to your band, to your cafeteria, to administration, nurse, art, all the special spaces that are shared will have a connection in. Once you cross this line into this academic neighborhood right here, you are now in that grade, and no other grades will be circulating through this space. So that's your home base. We're starting to play with the geometry a bit, and I think this will massage and move and get a little tighter as we continue to develop it. But we are very sensitive to the perceived lengths of corridors, so that's where we're kinking and breaking this up. We're creating those small little learning breakout spaces that Joe talked about that happen outside of the classroom. So that's when the corridor gets a bit wider, that's where small group instruction can happen outside of the classroom. We are currently showing 3 stairs based on the occupant load. We do see the stair that is closest to the Main Street being really the main stair. So say this is a 7th grade wing on ground on the first floor, 8th grade wing is stacked up above. We are suggesting right now 2-story academic wings. So the 8th graders would be utilizing the stair majority of the time, so there really will be no mixing of the 2 grades within that wing. That'll happen outside in Main Street. So we're sensitive to the crossing of students and ages as well. As Joe mentioned, for grades 6th, 7th, and 8th, there's really a 3 core typical classroom team, which is made up of that 850 square foot typical classroom, and then they will travel from either of these 3 classrooms over to a science classroom. So 6th, 7th, and 8th have 3 science classrooms, and then 3 teams of 3 classrooms each, indicated here. At the center of the knuckle are really kind of the support spaces for this wing. And we're suggesting in the middle, they can move to either end as we continue to massage this plan. But we figured for travel distances, make it equal travel distance regardless of where you are on the wing. You come right to the center. This is where you have your group restrooms for the boys and girls, your gender neutral toilet room directly adjacent. faculty restrooms, faculty print and storage room, and also 2 special ed resource rooms, which are located in each academic wing, again, right at the center. As we mentioned, the site is fantastic, and Chris will talk a bit more about that. Fantastic opportunities for, just views alone to nature, but also opportunities to connect to the outdoors with some safe, kind of corralled outdoor learning opportunities on the site. This little diagram on the left-hand side is something that we start to look at early on in the design process, because it impacts how the building performs mechanically, but also within a classroom, so you don't have to have blinds pulled and curtains drawn throughout the day. We like to maximize the east-west orientation, linear direction for classroom wings. So classrooms typically will generally either face south or north, because it's easier to control the sun throughout the day. In the morning and in the evening, the sun is dropping or rising. It's harder to control. So this has an impact on the daylight quality within the classroom, maintaining the views out without having to draw the blinds, but also has a significant impact on mechanical systems and the sizing of the mechanicals as we get down the line. So in each of these options, you see the wings typically in this orientation on the plan, and that's done intentionally. 5th grade, as Joe mentioned, this is kind of the transition grade, and where this wing happens within the school is important. I think we'll have discussions on which wing is the 5th grade wing, and we think it makes sense that this is on the ground floor, and above it, most likely, would probably be the 6th grade, because they will be utilizing this stair here. So 5th graders and 6th graders out in that main street, that's where the intersection would happen. The program itself works out very nicely that these wings are very close to the same square footage, so they can stack nicely on top of each other. So we have 2 academic wings, 2 stories each, and it really minimizes the footprint on the site, as you see, which is really important. And in this grade, in 5th grade, basically you have a 2 classroom structure where social studies and English would be shared happen within this 800 square foot classroom. And then directly across the hall for each of these teams would be your math and science lab, which is slightly larger, around 1,000 square feet. So you have groups, typical classroom, directly across the class, across the corridor is your math and science. And we can come back and discuss any of this, obviously, after we run through. So just for reference, this white box on the left-hand side, this gray box, is a first pass at a footprint for option A. Those academic wings that we just talked about, is basically one of these is what we're looking at right here. So this would be a 2-story academic neighborhood, and then over here would be another academic neighborhood. The main street, as you'll see in the coming slide, runs basically north and south, and this portion over here would be your larger volumes, really your public spaces, your gym, your caf, your auditorium. And with that, I'll let Chris kind of walk through some early thinking.
So what you're seeing in these dashed lines, I'll start here, is this green line is that same wetland line that we looked at on the site analysis. So this is the area of wetlands that would be undisturbed, and that occurs here. You see it over here, and you see it over on the eastern boundary. What you see as the white dashed line is kind of the overarching no-build zone for site improvements, including grading. That's the white line. So you can see we're trying to stay outside of these white lines. That's kind of that's our goal. I did not show the building, the no-build for the building, because we're clearly outside of it. So this is how we set this particular option on site, and these are what I would call a concept bubble diagram. So these are very early on, just trying to distinguish in big bubbles where parking, where fields, where circulation would happen. So I'll talk through each of these colors, and then you'll get the gist of it. So what we decided to do was show 2 circulation patterns. We're not distinguishing which is parent drop-off and pickup and which is bus drop-off and pickup, because I think that's still very flexible. What I would say is that we try to create the longest queue on site as possible, and we continue to evolve this over time. This is, first pass is a first pass. So what we're showing here is in the blue circulation route, we're using Linwood as an access point. And this is important because we want to try to separate the parents from the buses. And so we're doing that with its circulation A and B, the blue and the orange. So coming off of Linwood, you sweep around the parking lot, and this drop-off zone is in the solid blue line, and then you exit back out into Linwood. On Mark, you would come in with the orange circulation route, you'd come up alongside a field, and you'd cross over, and you'd drop off at another portion of the school, and then you'd leave the same way you came in. I'll make an important note here that affects both options that you'll see tonight, is there is a crossing, and this is mapped out to be right over where there's a gravel path that leads from the existing elementary school site to the existing field that you can see here in the woods. That's the narrowest point that allows us a break between two wetlands. It's already graded as a pathway, so we're using that as our point to be able to have two access points that both lead to the school. Obviously, the entire site development will have to go through permitting. This will be further analyzed and discussed as to how that crossing works and how we can make that happen. In addition, the green bubbles close to the building are outdoor classroom opportunities where we could have areas to gather, either large or small, that relate to the outdoor natural resources that surround the site. In addition, we have a large green area over here. We're just calling it field, open space, flexible space, and then a pedestrian path in yellow that would lead directly to it. Parking areas in blue, obviously access from Linwood over here and access from Mark Drive up to these two parking spaces, similar to the parking that's over there now for the elementary school. And then lastly, we have service entrance over here in gray, and then this area in red, we're considering, after we talk with fire and police, what kind of access we would have to have around the entire back of the building. It would be restricted access, and we talk about how that would be restricted with those groups and with the building committee. We would want to keep as much natural buffer of the trees around the edges of the property as possible outside of those obviously protected areas.
Back up real quick. So what's different between option A and B? A few things, but what's nice about option A is it takes this parking area, the main parking area, pulls it kind of deep into the site and elongates it. The main entrance to the school, although as Chris mentioned, there'll be different drop-off and arrival areas, which most likely will be supervised. But once school begins, classes, kids are in session, everyone obviously will come to this front door, and there'll be a secure protocol for entering the school. But for evening events and weekend events with the gym, the cafeteria, and an auditorium, and this portion of the building will be directly adjacent to the parking area. So keep that in mind when we click the page here. So these are those academic fingers that we just talked about. And they can bend and shape in different configurations as we move forward. But the main thing to think about here is that main entrance point right here, which would have a secure entrance, the secure vestibule, which we will review the security protocol. Anyone entering the school after school begins will be forced into the main office or not let into the school at all, so they will not be able to enter without being allowed. If you drew a line right through the plan from here to here, the top portion, so we call really the private portion of the school, it's deeper into the site in this option. It's farther away from access points into the site, so it's on the quieter side of the school. Each of these wings would be 2 stories, so the same footprint, same footprint that you see here would be up on the second floor as well. The front door of these academic neighborhoods, this red dot indicates areas that we can, again, talking about security, layers of security. There'll be a set of doors that can be shut down and locked during a security protocol, but also evening and weekend use. I know this school is really important to the community as well, so evening and weekend use, those wings can be locked down. No one has any business walking down these wings, but they will have access to Main Street, the media center for evening meetings, the gymnasium, the auditorium, the cafeteria, without having access. This portion of Main Street that we're calling, this is really your academic hub. This is where robotics, coding, your technology classroom, your media center all these celebrated spaces happen along Main Street, and students are passing them throughout the day. You're seeing into the space, and really getting students excited about the special spaces. Media Center obviously is a truly celebrated space, and really anchors these to all the academic wings. As you move further down Main Street, this green box, I think I changed some colors from Joe, I apologize, but green stands out a little bit better. We have administration, nurse, and guidance. It's centrally located within the plan, as a prominent location, obviously directly adjacent to the main entrance, but also with eyes on, kind of passive supervision of anyone entering the site and approaching the building. So it wants to be upfront, wants to be visible, wants to be one of the first portions of the building that you see and that you come across. This other side, kind of the south side of the main entrance here, this is your public zone. Almost serves as a kind of a community center of sorts, where you'll have your gymnasium, your PE support spaces, and students using the fields across the way can exit the building here, walk across that path, or exit Main Street and access the fields on the other side of the site. The smaller arrow, put this here for evening and event entrances, so if these doors are unlocked for a special event, directly adjacent to parking, you can enter the building, enter the gymnasium, your auditorium, or your cafeteria. Adjacent to the auditorium, we like to house the music classrooms, the choral and band spaces. Obviously, there's a strong relationship between the use of these. Often these spaces are used as green rooms, kind of prep spaces for student performances, so they can prep within a classroom and access the back of the stage during the performance. Also locating music on this end of the building, can't get any farther away from a typical classroom, so the acoustic separation is ideal. It's perfect in this location. It's kind of isolated from the rest of the school. And then Chris mentioned that service spur, which as soon as you enter the site, you immediately peel off. So service vehicles, trash, delivery are not penetrating deep into the site, so they're not really mixing with cars, buses, or students at all. And then they can serve this cafeteria. You have a fantastic resource, having these wetlands on site. It kind of limits where we can develop, but also preserves, the natural setting, which is pretty magical on the site. So we love to capitalize on that with views. We're locating the cafeteria right now in this location here. Maybe there's opportunities for some outdoor dining, outdoor learning opportunities on a secure portion of the site. Also the ends of these corridors we're opening up, and framing these fantastic views out to the natural setting. And so I should mention this again. This is all obviously a single-story building, and the footprint is the footprint. We are trying to minimize the footprint of the building and the impact it has on the site, all by being respectful of the height of the building. So as I mentioned, these academic portions, basically the top portion of the building, will be a two-story structure. The bends and kinks in the plan also help to minimize the size, the perceived size, as we start to mass up this building and design it in verticality and add some roof lines. By adding kinks and bends, it helps to minimize the size. So we are being sensitive of the neighbors and the scale of this building as much as possible. This portion of the building, typically larger volume spaces. Your gymnasium, you typically want 25-foot clear from floor to the bottom of the structure, plus structure, so it's going to be a taller volume, so there's going to be nothing above that. Same thing with the auditorium and the cafeteria. So all of this will be a single-story building, no spaces above it. And then option B.
Yeah, so the second option is definitely definite change in the building footprint, which Mike will talk about a little bit more, but you'll still see those academic wings right here, and then all the community space is here. So as far as the site circulation, back to our circulation A and circulation B. Circulation A is taking advantage of access off of Linwood, coming into the site, dropping off, and exiting out the same way. We're showing a double blue line here to try to get as much stacking of cars onto the site as possible, or buses, whichever is preferred. And then the orange circulation route, again, comes in around the existing elementary school area and then loops around a separate drop-off zone and exits the same way they came in. Again, access on the weekends and for auxiliary parking through Mark Drive, and outdoor learning spaces on either side of the classroom wings. The service is to the north of the school, and then restricted access around the back of the school as shown in the previous option. option. And then a little bit of extra parking and open space, and then the same open space over here.
So, even though it looks like a drastically different plan, I think the main organizing elements are consistent, and that we are really dividing the school into the public and private zones. This one, however, the main entrance is at an end versus in the middle on option A. So this one, nurse, guidance, administration, really eyes on anyone entering the school through a secured entrance, and anyone entering off of Linwood would have eyes on really the front door. What divides the two spaces, the public on the right-hand side, these larger box spaces, and the private, the academic fingers, is Main Street, and that becomes this element that joins the two sides. So on the left-hand side, we imagine this as your fifth grade academic wing, closest to the front door, closest to administration, closest to the nurse, closest to art, closest to the specials, and potentially above that, most likely sixth grade wing would sit. Further down the corridor would be your seventh and eighth grade wing. And then very similar to the previous option, the media center and these tech spaces, these celebrated spaces, the media center, the academic hub is really the uniting force, the program piece that unites the two academic wings. And then along Main Street, you have your arts, celebrated arts up front, your auditorium, your stage, your music. Music's a little closer, but it's still acoustically separated from the academic portions, the academic wings. So anyone coming for a performance or students using the auditorium would enter directly off Main Street. Further down, we're locating the gymnasium with the PE support spaces with close proximity to a pedestrian path to get to the other side of the site. And then the cafeteria, we're locating at the top of the plan. At the end, again, nice opportunities for some outdoor dining or just taking in the views and letting in. It's north facing, so you have really controlled north light. You don't have to worry about being blinded and being the sun glaring into the space. And then there's a really nice wooded area, so take advantage of that as well. And again, as we move along, some of these spaces might move as we get some feedback. The cafeteria might want to move to the front, the gym might want to move here. So I think that there's a lot of variations and variables that we can play with each of these options as we move forward. This is kind of the broad brush, kind of first pass at a school organization. So security-wise, very similar to the previous option, these red dots, you can secure down these academic wings, then anything from this line to the right can be accessed evenings and weekends by visitors. And so we kind of zoomed out and put option A and option B side by side. We'd love to hear some feedback and comments if you have any. We'd love to. It'd be great to have a direction. Not saying that's going to be the final plan, but in general, an organization, potentially how the site circulation works is critical on these, and we can continue over the next coming months to refine and come back with different options of A or B and continue to refine this as we move forward. And anything else, Tina or Joe, you want to add? Okay.
Pretty comprehensive, so.
Okay.
So before we ask, so I have a few questions, and then I think that we all may have some questions. Just has this been shared with the school committee yet? No. Okay. All right. In your experience, at what point would you share this with the school committee? Okay. I would think so. Good. Okay. Second, I just have three questions really, and then we'll just open it up. Second question would be very, very excited about the outdoor classroom. However, it is 2023, regretfully, and I just wonder, is this commonplace in the schools that you're building right now? And if it is, how do you interact with public safety to ensure we're not compromising the safety of the building? So, but I guess, first, is this common?
Yes.
It is.
It
is. It's very
So right
much.
is a grant for outdoor classes.
And then I would assume that you have interacted with public safety to ensure that it doesn't compromise many of the public safety mechanisms that are throughout the building. My third question is probably more of a comment, but is concerning. And then I think I want to turn it over to everybody else. You actually don't even have to answer this, but I have to be honest with you. So watching this, I am very concerned about this site. So we're spending $107 million, and there is less recreational open space and field. than we have currently at Davisville and potentially Wickford. I mean, Davisville right now, we have a soccer field, we have 3 baseball fields, we have an area where I was actually there 4 weeks ago, because the track and field coach was very concerned that there wasn't enough room and we had to move some fences to allow them to run. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying $107 million, and we have less baseball fields and less field space than we have now. And I question, and I have to question it, I question whether this is the appropriate site. Because of the wetlands and the desire to maintain the character with all the open space. I commend you for that. I think you've done an admirable job with that. I'm just wondering if you've done the best you can, great job, with potentially maybe a poor hand that you were dealt. Because I am very concerned about spending this kind of money and having no baseball fields, again, I'm just very concerned. More of a commentary, rather than you answer that, I think I'd like to open up to everyone, but I am extremely concerned. I don't know if anybody else has any questions. I'm sorry, this is for my apologies, we have the public comment, so.
Yes, of course.
It's not of course, there's an open meeting, we're trying to do the best we can to help, and if there's any questions afterwards, I will stay, and you can feel free to ask me anything you want, and I will make sure I get you the answer if I don't have it tonight.
Yeah, a couple questions. So is there adequate staff parking adjacent to the school with these options? I saw you flash some space numbers earlier, and I wasn't thinking that seems like it adds up, but.
Yeah, why don't you take this?
Yeah, the early numbers, the early target numbers are 135 parking spaces for staff.
Okay.
And then an extra additional, I think it was 15 for visitors. So what you see here is, approximately 95 to 100 in this bubble diagram for option A, right? To the east of the main common area of the building, and then another 15 to 20. So we're almost there, right, for staff parking. We're going to have to put some visitor parking close to the front of the building anyway. And then on the other side, there's that kind of long strip of parking that's another approximately, I think it says 35. So between those 3, we would get to that, at least that target of 150. So we have to continue to develop the plan from the bubble diagram to actually laying out the parking so we can see that we can fit. This is based on our experience and kind of internally mapping it out. In the second option, again, there's parking along the south side of the building that would accommodate and get us close to the amount of staff parking, again, with some visitor parking underneath that for there as well.
The other question I have, and this is just random, with the very small space that you're having to force this into, and the fact that we're trying to do grades 5 through 8 in this building. If it was a 6 through 8 building, which is what our schools are set up now, I guess because of the 2-story learning neighborhoods, that doesn't seem like it changes the footprint very much. But what would you estimate as your change? Could you estimate a change in square footage if 5th grade wasn't there, and would it potentially help this site layout?
I think each neighborhood is around 10 to 15,000 square foot. So each of those wings, each floor is about 10 to 15,000. So that would be gross.
The other
But you're
areas
right,
wouldn't change, though.
No, the footprint wouldn't change necessarily. It would just mean that you would have one of the wings a 1-story wing, and the other wing would be a 2-story wing. Most likely that would.
So that wouldn't change your overall space
No,
needed.
there might be some reductions in some of the common spaces, but those spaces really don't change that much. There's not a gigantic change on the footprint of those.
Thank you.
I'm looking at the one with the outside athletic field. One of the pictures you had, they actually showed the field with the track. Should be very necessity to have a running track a regular track. This is middle school. You got 1,000 kids here. You've got a neighborhood of people who might wanna go, and go take a walk around the track, walk a lap. That's the picture right there, something like that. I think it's very important to have a track, especially when we just had Wickford win the girls' state championship and the boys' divisional championship, whatever. Second thing, you consider one gym enough with 1,000 students?
We actually have 2 gym spaces. We have a
Or we just get
we have a
PA?
full-size gym, and then we have another fairly large room, how much is it? 1,500 square foot, but tall ceiling for the second room. Remember, this room is under 1,000 square foot, so imagine 50% more space, but a 2-story volume is the second PE space that we have in the building.
Just to clarify and piggyback on Jack's question, so if you put a track there, you don't get a baseball field. Right, it's one or the other.
Yeah, you can't.
It's one or the other.
I thought you had a soccer,
It's a real concern for me.
separate
It's
soccer
just-
field.
It's one or the other.
Yeah.
It's pretty, I know, right now,
And that's why I'm on the same thing with the space for what you need.
you have a track and field, forget baseball. If you have baseball, forget track and field. If you have track and field, forget soccer. Yeah.
Can the track even fit?
It doesn't fit.
Yeah,
It doesn't fit.
Yeah, I'll go back to what I was talking about before. We did these as test fits to figure out like how much of the wetland buffers would be impacted. And, obviously you're creating basically generally a flat surface, big picture, for a track and field or a baseball field. So you've got all the grading around it, and then you've got circulation to the school, which we've talked about in the later diagrams. So, it just shows too much impact. Now,
Neither one of those fit, correct?
correct.
Yeah, those are off the table. Neither one of those fit.
Yeah, that's why we're showing it tonight as test fits.
Yes.
What we have done in the past is we have done multi-use fields with a walking track around it. That's not the standard track and field that you're used to seeing, but it is a
It's a
walking.
very competitive town, North Kingston.
I
Very
understand.
athletic, competitive town, so I'm serious, but
Yeah, I
something
understand.
like that,
Yeah.
and kids start at a young age,
Yeah.
and they're used to that kind of stuff. I
Understand.
mean, we build little league fields all over town, and we just.
But I want to be clear that you have confirmed that we cannot fit a standard middle school baseball field on that parcel.
That is one.
Right, you can't fit it.
It doesn't fit.
Right, so what you've shown is just open field.
Right.
You have not shown a standard middle school regulated baseball field.
Right. Without adversely impacting
Right.
wetlands,
Right.
right? The setbacks and the rules and regulations of the state of Rhode Island
Right.
prohibit us from touching.
But I guess I have to ask, so again, right now we have a 500 student school with 3 baseball fields and a soccer field. We have another 500 student school with 2 major fields and an open space they use for soccer. We're gonna combine them for 1,000 kids, and we're taking away all fields. There's no more baseball fields, and I just want, that's what I'm hearing. Okay?
Could we go back to the final 2 graphs? With regard to the field that you have identified on the right, they seem very similar. And obviously the design of the school is different in both of them. Is there a way to, I see a parking strip that runs along the left-hand side of each of these. Is there a way to expand the playing field if you eliminated that parking strip, or is there a way to move it to the left so that you can create more space? And I understand what Ralph is talking about, and I'm just trying to, is there anything that can be done to be able to address that?
Again, going from a conceptual bubble diagram to actually starting to hardline things, we can push and pull things and maximize things as much as we can. We still want to create that circulation route along that edge, even if we were to eliminate the parking, which is just an extra 18 feet from the depth of the parking space. we would still wanna have that circulation route.
So the orange line would migrate west
A little
a
bit.
little bit through the, what is in essence that blue parking area.
And then.
I'm just not sure how much more space that would free up, it might free some, but
Right, and you may compromise the parking, so you're giving up, you're taking D field and taking parking or whatever.
if you were to move it to the left, would there be a way to increase the parking down at the end, on the bottom here?
We can certainly take a look at it as we get
I'm not sensing a lot of
site
optimism here.
information.
Is that,
Yeah, I'm just looking at where the tree line is and where the wetland buffer is and where the existing roadway, access roadway is to the elementary school. So we'd have to, hug the wetland boundary where we have to, so it might kind of scoop in and then go around and then come back around depending on how those.
The orientation is correct.
Yeah, we can certainly reduce, so if we're meeting the parking counts between what's closest to the school, and then, we've got some extra in there, some wiggle room, we can certainly reduce the parking area that's on the lower right corner and expand the field in its north-south direction. But I think you still probably need some community parking over there.
and this whole area in between the parking and the large green area in between the school and then an open space field, this is all wetland area,
Correct.
essentially unbuildable.
Right.
Did you have the opportunity to read the master facilities plan at all?
We did.
When the consultant recommended this site, did they mention the wetlands at all?
No, sir. Well, there was a little bit on the west side.
Yes, the creek, I remember the
But
creek.
everything,
I remember the creek, I don't remember anything about all
the other thing on the other side, no.
Okay. So when they were looking for a 25-acre site, they never mentioned the fact that half of it may be unbuildable.
We said that all along.
That's what we've been telling you.
Are there any other questions?
Mrs. Slade has faithfully attended these meetings, and she's raised an issue, and then we heard something from one of the public comments about water tables. The area that you do consider to be buildable, do you have any concerns about that? About whether you're going into a problem?
We don't know yet because the geotech hasn't been completed. So once they do some drilling, they'll tell us exactly where that water table is, and it'll be plotted close to the footprint. And then we'll be able to report on it.
When do you anticipate getting answers to that?
Is that in this slide?
Yeah, 1 second,
You want- I'm sorry, I didn't, is Inge gonna present as well?
Inge has 2 or 3 slides
Yeah.
as part of this.
I didn't know that.
No, it's just
They're
part of
scheduled for July, so middle of July.
And that's just the work to do it, and then they have to report, then they have to take the information and then report back.
Did you say there's more slides?
I think Inge, you have 3
Well, I
slides.
had a couple just to go over the reimbursement and bonus points.
Is that under the timeline update? Or?
Yeah, it's right here.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So before we turn that over, before we turn over the timeline update, 2 things. Are there any other questions?
I have one other thing.
Sure.
All this, chamber chair, that's all included in the actual price of the building store?
It will be, yes.
And it is, okay, that's all, yeah, I'm looking at some nice
Yeah,
equipment.
the intent is to have all new everything.
Yeah, that's okay. We just wanted to use it.
So before we turn to the timeline update, I have to take a personal privilege, if anybody else wants to, we can, that, just to commend you on the work that you've done, but more importantly, I've never had the opportunity to work with you before, and I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of groups and build a lot of different things. I can't commend you enough for your honesty. So I'm asking questions and you could easily, it's a difficult situation. You could easily say, well, try to work this, try to work that. You've been honest, you've been in front. That's a breath of fresh air. I just want to commend you for that. Those were some difficult questions and you're trying to put together something and So again, thank you for that, and just, I think it helps us in what we're trying to accomplish for our kids in our community, so thank you, meant a lot. Timeline update.
It is.
Alright, let's see. This is just a slide to direct everyone, if there's any questions, comments, everything will be posted on the website. We're talking about potential social media, which will also be posted with a link on the website. I created a QR code, welcome to scan it, it takes you to the website. We'll be posting everything we share here and more there. So, if any questions, comments, or access issues, let us know. We can go to the next slide. The colors are so yeah, that's very interesting. You are, they look totally different. You are, I think mine were purple. Never mind, doesn't matter. That's not important actually. So we started looking, there were a lot of questions when things will be done and how things will be done, and there's more to this, but basically, I guess, I put together just like a high level timeline. We are in, I guess, the yellow portion of this process, and that is this is the stage 2 and the referendum timeline. After that, which goes to the end of this year, assuming we're still planning to do what we're doing. Of course, this might shift, and will shift if we have to shift anything. The construction itself is assumed at about 24 months and last from, at this pace that we're in, from year 25 to year 27. We have to get basically the schematic design in to an extent in order to submit to RIDE and get RIDE approval, and we also need to determine the cost of the building with the schematic design that we plan to do this summer. The studies that we are working on is, the traffic, is environmental, wetlands, geotechnical. High level, everything, the reports will be available midsummer to the end, somewhere end of July, beginning of August, but everything sort of has been started because you can see a lot of work went into this presentation alone and a lot of studying of the site. Traffic studies ongoing, but it takes time to produce those reports and have the reports available to the public to read or download. As soon as they are done, we are going to share them and post them on the website. So, environmental study, we're thinking end of July. Wetland is completed. However, we still need to put together the report. So that is, we hope to get it done by the end of June. And the geotechnical study, as I said, it's scheduled. It started, but scheduled to do some tests middle of July, and we will have it by mid to end of August as a report. The design activities, very high level as well, but it's programming, which we have completed, and this is what was presented today. The next step is sort of confirming the footprint of the building, the building design within the interior level, and also identifying various building systems such as HVAC systems, electrical systems, IT, AV, everything, because that is a big portion of the stage 2 submission as well. So we haven't touched on it yet, but this is something that's forthcoming. Regardless of where the building is, it's something that as a team we have to identify. There's different things to do there. And they also impact cost and lead times and things like that. We do have to get, a construction manager or construction company on board before June of 24. The deadline has been extended for that because the whole team has to be on board in order for us to qualify for the bonus points. In this case, it is somewhere at the end of design development, as I see it. beginning of construction documents phase, which is probably a construction manager type approach, because we will not have a full set to go out to bid. However, because of the extension, it gives us more time to deliberate and figure that out, which we did not have before. Go to next. There have been questions on various bonus points. So relative to RIDE, some new updates, as you may have heard. Now the district qualifies for the full 20%, not 17.5% as it was before, for additional bonus points. The base rate is 35, so the maximum as it stands today for reimbursement from the state is 55%, and the district's minimum contribution would be 45% if the district qualifies for all the points. In addition, in the future, there may be some other incentives relative to net zero and sort of sustainability and sustainable design. At the moment, it all caps at 20. However, that might change prior to the end of this year. The bonus points that are available. So I can actually walk up there and just quickly touch on them because there was a question today. There are 7 of them. There are, in general, these are all sort of out there, and they're still all extended till June of 24. The school safety and security right here, this building will not qualify for this right away because it's strictly for sort of accelerated repair projects, or just a safety and security project where you would upgrade almost the entire building, existing building. So that's out. Everything else is on the table, so 6 points are on the table. Health and safety, educational enhancements are basically kind of a given because this is a newer building and we're obviously enhancing the educational environment. And health and safety, because of new building codes, we do will be at or above those requirements. Then there's the newer and fewer, which is didn't know I can touch this thing.
Magic.
I guess I can do this right away. Oh, okay. The newer and fewer. This is combining buildings and creating less sort of distributed buildings into one, which the district qualifies for with this approach. So these 3 are 15 extra points. They qualify from the get-go. Then we have 3 others. Replacement, and I did hear the 65%, the FCI and the Jacobs report. This can be reevaluated. A lot of districts actually go for reevaluation because the report has been done some time ago. So if we do go for this, we can reevaluate any of the buildings that we want to qualify this point. And then there is decrease overcrowding or increased utilization. So we are currently looking into all of these 3 options. I think we'll have a definite answer for next school building committee meeting on which are recommended out of these 3. So I don't have an answer for that, but it's one of these 3. Well, actually, they are all potentially qualifiable. We need to come up with one that is mostly appropriate for this approach, and I'm not ready to share that. I literally don't know. So it's not like we're hiding any information, we're just trying to figure this out. We are going to meet with RIDE to discuss that as well. And once we do, we'll report back. I think this is all I said. So, any questions? I'm happy to answer.
I have a question.
20%.
I have a question. So the additional incentives, could that be on top of the 20% we're already qualified for?
So these incentives are the 20%. So each incentive is 5%. So in order for the district to receive the extra 20%, we have to submit to RIDE as part of stage 2 the intent. So the intent is we'll have to write, there is a narrative that I typically write, and the intent is to which incentive points the district will go and pursue. we know for sure that the three right here, and then we have to pick one of these other three and decide what is the best for this particular project.
So we can choose any 4 of those 7, basically.
Yes.
And-
The goal is to be able to submit for all 4, because
Yes.
this building and this program qualifies for 4 for sure. And there's no doubt about it. It's just making sure we choose the right ones.
If we could, again, we probably qualify for more than 4.
Yes,
Choose that from
we could. If
we
there
can
was
go
no
for the
cap,
maximum,
if
yes.
there was no cap,
Yes.
I would say we can easily go for 5, because you cannot. So you cannot decrease overcrowding and increase utilization. So you can go one or the other.
Yes.
So basically, this particular program can qualify for 5 points. However, they cap it at 4.
Yes.
And then what did you say about there's a possibility of sustainability and net zero? Those are possible additional bonuses?
Yes. So the
On
way
top
it is,
of-
the way it is right now is that, for example, if the district only qualified for 3, not 4, say it's only 15 extra percent, the net zero will get the district up to 4 additional, so it will be 19. Okay, but you cannot go over 20. There are conversations about it, but it's not.
Not in play right now.
Yeah.
So the net zero bonus basically does not apply to us at this time. It does, but we can't go over 20 anyway. We're eligible for 5, so.
Correct. I do think that, and actually I want to enter here, I think it's at some point it might qualify, correct? And I think there is a lot of conversations.
Do you mind introducing today out of the room when
Yes, so I was alone when we started, but now I'm not. I have Antoinette Roy and I have Surya Patel. Surya works for Jacobs and Antoinette works for CAP, and they are part of our team at Jacobs. No, I think you have
Any other questions? Mike, this is public forum, I'm sorry. I don't know.
So, we had reposted it, to discuss scheduling public forums so that we can get more information out. So I apologize if the copy we have in front of us just says public forum.
Okay,
So
that's right.
it's talking about when is the most appropriate time to schedule a public forum. As I mentioned at the school committee meeting last evening, it's kind of a tricky balance because there are a lot of information that folks want, but as Inga just demonstrated, there's some studies that are out. So we don't want to schedule one premature and have all the same questions that we're also waiting on the answers. So I wanted to bring to the table, when do folks think the most appropriate time for public forums on this would be?
So I will say that, I'm going to say a few things and then see if it helps. Number 1 is, obviously, you're right, want to have as many public forums as possible. Number 2, I definitely agree with you. There seems like a lot of information that still has to be gathered prior to a public forum. Number 3, I can tell you that normally when there's something on the ballot in November, if whatever you can postpone until after Labor Day is always good. People are, they're thinking of the summer, but I don't want to delay stuff. So putting all that on the table, my professional opinion is that I'd like to get direction from the school committee as to when they think. Again, this is a school project, and so when do they think public forums should be scheduled, knowing that there's still information that has to be gathered. I wouldn't want to, my opinion, I wouldn't want to dictate to the school committee. I'd like them to listen to this, and then decide when do we think we should have some public forums, and then we can assist in any way and take the lead, or just be a support system to get those public forums scheduled. But that's just my opinion. But if anybody disagrees, please jump in.
I have a question, and I don't know if the architects can help answer this. As far as public forum goes, in addition to sharing information, would you be looking to collect input from the community as far as any design components of the building? Would you be looking to receive information as well as give information?
One of the characteristics of the Perkins Eastman team is that we're very good listeners. And so, we take what we hear very seriously because we want to form a school that's specific to your community. So that input is very important in how we shape our building and the kinds of things that we've learned. So yes, that would be very nice to have.
So, I guess going back to what Ralph said earlier, maybe we do need to just double check, is September 15th for the stage 2, is that the deadline that we have to follow? Because if they need input from the community to help them, and we need to get out information, it's kind of a time crunch there.
So there's two opportunities, well, September 15 and the next opportunity for stage 2 is February 15, so you cannot submit before that. The next opportunity after that is September 15th of 25. If the submission happens September 15th, RIDE provides approval by the end of the year. If submission happens February 15th, RIDE provides approval by end of May of 24, which means that no construction or buyout of materials can happen until after May of 24. End of this year provides a flexibility of that. I'm just giving out the information that exists. I'm not saying one or the other.
That also doesn't, I think we mentioned it before, it doesn't necessarily bode well for the question on the ballot either. If we're saying, oh, we're going to push this off till February, but we're still required to have that vote in November.
There is one other item to consider, is PAYGO. The longer district waits, the less opportunities for PAYGO there will be. Right now, although I don't... PAYGO. So PAYGO, to explain, so some people know, PAYGO is basically once the project gets approved by RIDE SBA, at the moment the way the legislature is written is that 15% of that approval qualifies for kind of upfront monthly funding. So it's not in addition to the bond or to the project or the MOA. It is part of that. However, the district can submit on invoices or amounts of money that's spent right away and get reimbursed monthly, so within 2 weeks of submission. That really helps with some of those upfront costs. That helps to offset maybe some bonding capacities and whatnot. That was part of a statewide bond that happened a few years ago, and that funding is sort of running out, and depending on how many districts submit each time, the distribution may change. However, and there is no guarantee right now how much. I know there is a little bit of we can't really know exactly if it's 15%, 10%, but we do know that the longer you wait, the less that opportunity exists. So for December, the PAYGO is a little bit maybe more guaranteed, we know might be available better than it is in May of 24. That's just...
And so the PAYGO would fund things, for example, like the contracts.
Correct.
The architect contract, the Jacobs contract, all
yes.
those items.
Basically what happens is that RIDE gives you the amount, for example, let's say 16 million or 10 million. Let's say it's 20 million for rounded purposes. So you get they say, okay, well, your bond is 167 or whatever, and that portion you can apply, submit for reimbursement upfront. You have to spend basically kind of more to get that money back, because it's at the value they give you is that it's your 35% that they give you. So it's a really good tool. Like, it helps the district, but again, it's one of the variables to consider. It's not a good or a bad one.
And then with regards to the bonuses, you don't get that reimbursement till the end of the project, and that's because you have to essentially prove to RIDE. If you said, well, we're gonna go newer and fewer, they want to wait till the end of the project to say, yes, you are in fact going from 2 middle schools to 1 middle school, and that's when you get those bonus dollars?
Correct. So part of stage 2, we write up the narrative, we tell them what we're gonna go for. tell them that, you know, we're gonna go for A, B, C, D. They say, okay, great, but the districts will get this, reimbursement at the end, because housing aid, is reimbursement at the end at project completion. And there are forms, but I've heard a lot of times it says, well, RIDE doesn't guarantee, or it's not guaranteed. RIDE will comply and will provide the reimbursement for these bonuses if the program has been completed as promised at stage 2.
So you've never seen it where somebody's applied at stage 2 and Ryan said, you're gonna get these bonuses, and at the end, they don't give them the bonuses. I know that was a concern.
Right, so they will not write anything or say something like, they will not tell us, we're gonna give you these, but they'll say that, yes, you potentially qualify, and then at the end, if you did everything and in fact complied with the bonuses, there is a form, you know, everyone has to certify that form, the architect. Yeah. Sure.
So the way the program works is that you apply for your necessity of construction. You apply for your necessity of construction and you go for your bond. The state does not reimburse you until your project is substantially complete. At the end of the project, you fill out a slew of forms, including the F-100, which includes all the bonus programs and what you pay for your bond and so on. At the end of that, if you have successfully completed everything that you have said you're going to complete, RIDE will go ahead and pay that in full.
But there's never been a case that I know of.
Not that I've been consultant for RIDE for the last 5 years, and I have not seen anybody been denied. And then just to touch on the pay-as-you-go funding again, there are 20 districts that are in right now for approvals. So the pay-as-you-go funding is a funding that is not a lifetime fund. So therefore, that pay-as-you-go funding will be distributed between whoever gets approved this December, and whatever's left over after that will get distributed to the remaining towns that get funded. But it may be more now, it may be less later. We don't know until we understand who's going to get fully approved and who's not.
Getting back to what Ralph said, and I know it's getting late, it's already at 7 o'clock. It seems to me that we do need public forums where people can come and ask us questions and hear from you folks. Been all over the place thinking about what would work, but it seems to me that we ought to have at least one public forum over the course of the summer. I would think probably in August. We go through July, I don't know that you'll have everything that we need. We're gonna need a date, probably in mid to late August, I'm guessing.
I was thinking second week of August.
Okay. And I think before that happens, we need to figure out which plan. And I think there are going to be a lot of questions about some of the issues that Ralph has raised. I'm going to tell you something that I have been basing most of my review on what I saw in the master plan, and the reference in the master plan to the Quidnesset Elementary School area, which is presented as the greatest development opportunity, relatively free of environmental constraints, largely undeveloped and flat. I mean, I relied on that because that's what's in the master plan. You've kind of dropped a bomb here about what's in that 25-acre parcel that I wasn't aware of, and I don't think anybody else was either. So we're going to need to look at that. We're going to need to meet with you, and assuming that we have a decision and we go forward after that, I think we'll probably need another public forum in October, I would think, because there's a vote in November. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, especially at the beginning, it makes great sense. Great sense.
But, well, you know, the committee has to meet to talk about this. This is not something that, you know, I can make a commitment on, or that Rob can make a commitment on. But these are things that I think we've got to address and do it very quickly. I'm not pointing fingers, but it's very frustrating that I've been told one thing about this parcel, and now you're coming back and telling us something that's really quite different. That's not your fault. I appreciate the candor, but it's something we've got to address. So.
And one of the things I will look at when we leave here, and please know that this is not a precursor to anything that could happen. I want to hear from the school committee, and we'll follow their lead in that direction, but I will find out if the bond is site specific. I wrote that down there. That's, right. I think that's pretty important.
Well, this is the problem. I don't know where else we're going to do this, because there doesn't seem to be another location in this community where we own property and somebody has joked online about, you know, we can get a rich benefactor who wants to give us 26 acres. But I'm not aware of who that person is. So.
I would agree with you. I guess my only concern is that you and I are basing that on an assessment that now I know I am questioning. It sounds like you may be too. So,
well, with respect to that particular aspect of it, yes.
And does it have to be one school? You know, again, I'm not trying, you know, so, but.
I have a question.
I'm not going on.
If we touch that wetland, what kind of remedy we provide if we can in that area? And how much room we have to refurbish that wetland?
The short answer is, if we touch it, it's a very lengthy approval process. And according to our consultants, the likelihood of getting approval are very small. So we'll waste many, many months and a lot of money going through this process, and at the end, in essence, be denied. They're very, very strict about the wetlands and this idea of trading wetlands like we used to do in the old days with development. It's just not what's happening nowadays. It's very, very different than it was 15, 20 years ago. That's what we were told.
I have another quick question. So the report, the environmental site assessment report you said was still to come. Is there any chance any of these reports could reduce the space even further, or tell you can't do something that you're thinking about doing now?
We don't know for sure, but we don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the short answer.
Since we're asking questions about the site, what is buildable, I guess? How many acres do you think that is?
That's a good question.
Like how much of that parcel is actually buildable?
I'm not sure.
This one? Based on your estimations, because clearly what was in the report is not correct.
We can come back
Can
to
you
you
see
with
that?
that information, because we do
Pixelated,
have that, yeah,
okay.
we do have, because we did have.
We knew that was gonna be asked.
Yeah, we have a calculation that, prepared it, so.
Just because that might help us.
Yeah.
If
Yeah, we'll get
there's
that
some
for you.
change.
We'll come back to you with that number, so it has the developer area.
About half.
We need to just look at it.
This is my last number.
The gray area is the development.
Yeah, unfortunately, it is the top number, which you can't fix. We'll bring that back to you, yeah.
Okay. And that falls in, because I know Riot has minimum standards on space, like, so that obviously falls within the amount of space they say is required.
Right.
Yeah.
What was presented today is within rights.
Right.
Can I ask a quick question on the reimbursement? The 55% number that I was aware of and was shown under state right, and then the 45% under town local. Does the school department expect to get 100% of the bond money back on the construction, or no?
No, so we get 55% back.
Okay.
And what this, the 45 number is what we ultimately would be paying back. You know what I mean? So we're gonna get 167 million. We're gonna get back 55% of that from RIDE, potentially, and then we would only owe that other 45% for the town of the bond.
Just from a finance point of view, so where you're going is that, So we are going, the school and town are going to pay 100% upfront. And then each year, I think it starts in maybe 1 year after the CO, after we open the door. So we have to finance, we're gonna work together to finance it with bands. I'll be working with you, we'll come up with some solutions. And then once we put the key in the door, we'll roll the bands over into a bond. The bond payments then begin. A year after the bond payment, we get reimbursed 55% of our bond, of the principal. So I only say that because, so in reality, we're not getting 55% of the cost of the project because of the interest that we have to pay. But 55% of the principal, I believe that is correct, right? Or is it interest?
I believe it's principal and interest.
Principal
So that's
and
even better.
interest,
So that's-
yes,
that's-
yeah,
okay,
right,
that's-
participates
so
in
that
the
is-
interest.
Thank you, so whatever our payment is, thank you for that, we get 55% back. And is it, what, 1 year after we start paying the bond? or-
It's approximately 1 year.
Okay, so we'll have to come up and then, under the budget, you'll see school housing aid, and so that's how that works.
Okay, thank you.
So you have to appropriate funds upfront, pay upfront. It's a reimbursement program, so you reimburse at the end.
Yeah.
But RIDE can provide like a schedule of payments to help you figure this out.
And we did I can send you the slideshow that we put together, our financial advisors put together a slideshow as to each year's payment and how the reimbursement would work, and so how the debt cliff works. And so over time, again, the biggest impact I think was maybe 2028, 2029, because we're upfront in money, but we wait a year for the reimbursement, then you start seeing the debt cliff go down. So I can send that over to you.
Thanks so much.
You'd appreciate that.
I think this segues into next steps.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the next steps are though.
Should we schedule a July meeting?
So originally we were aiming for July meeting towards the end of July. I believe I said July 26th because that was falling after 50 or 60% completion of the package, right? I have
And
this.
will you have had the opportunity to go for the school committee first?
We can do that. However, my question is, do we need a meeting sooner? Because with all the questions we have here, so we need to go discuss them and then meet again earlier in July, not towards the end of July.
As
Maybe
far as the
middle.
building committee?
The school committee meets next time, July
We don't currently have a meeting scheduled until August,
until August.
which is pretty traditional, but,
I think we can call it special.
I think that there will be a special meeting based on that.
We were expecting.
And
I
I
don't know exactly.
And I think our next meeting should be after them. For us to meet again without the school committee weighing in on this, to me, doesn't make sense. That's just my opinion. I think the building committee has a very isolated role, and I think the school, but again, that's just my opinion, but people disagree, I'd like to hear that.
So-
Is your practice, and maybe you have more experience
I
than we
guess,
do.
well, I don't know, but in my practice, school building committee meets before the school committee, the school building committee reports to, school building committee reports to school committee.
It makes a recommendation.
Makes a recommendation. That isn't my experience. Again, I wasn't here when this was established.
Okay.
That is why you establish a subcommittee to come up with a recommendation reports.
Earlier for us, the building committee, to sit with this for a little bit, think about it, if we have more questions, and come back and discuss it as a group. But obviously, it's now 7:15 or so.
Well,
Then we also have a meeting with RIDE.
we have a meeting with RIDE on July 7th, and I know July is a tough month because people are out.
Is there any benefit to doing the meeting before that meeting with RIDE?
No. I would rather meet with RIDE, talk to them, report back what has been compiled, what we have, get input, and then come here to report. So I would recommend the 12th or the 19th unless we have to wait for school committee.
So I'm gonna follow
I
you.
know, you're out.
Yeah.
I'm gonna follow your lead, but I am gonna request that, the school committee is invited to the next meeting. Just, I think it's important that we hear from the educational body.
So that's a Wednesday.
Maybe the 19th. I'm sorry, Michael.
I was gonna say the 12th and the 19th is a Wednesday to Wednesday. I don't know if you're looking at June when we did that.
I'm looking at July, and I'm just saying a school building committee meeting on the 12th or the 19th. Well, I'm assuming Wednesdays is when this committee.
We're gonna have that meeting and we need a commitment that we're gonna know what these wetland studies show. We need to know that before we have the meeting. We're gonna be waiting on that for some point.
Yeah. When you say wetlands,
We have
you
the-
mean
we have the-
environmental?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I'm,
Yes,
I wanna know what that is.
Yeah, we can have, actually, we have that information, we have the pair.
The wetland studies, they said by the
He
end
said
of the month.
wetlands, like he meant environmental.
of this
This
month.
month, yes,
Okay.
that's in the.
Are you saying wetlands, or are you saying environmental?
Yes, I'd like to know the entire environmental impact before we make a decision about where we're gonna go. I don't think that's something.
Just to clarify, wetlands and environmental are two separate.
I understand, so if they're, I'd love to know both. I don't think that's something.
Geotech will be a little bit more.
Yeah, because they're gonna be drilling about that period of time, and then we won't hear back from them until after that.
Any information that we have, we'll bring to midnight, but we don't know what we're gonna get by then.
We don't have the information, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but if we don't have all the information, I'll put meetings and yell at the
And I,
We're gonna have to come back and, find out what's going on.
So, and that was my comment earlier about the public forums, is it doesn't, I agree, I think you need to be informed.
But again, the point, I mean, obviously, what we're saying here, and I don't mean to, is that if we meet on July 19th, and by some chance we come up with a solution to the wetlands, and we can design a field, and that's great, and then all of a sudden, on July 26th, the new studies show that, oh, wait, we're gonna move the stuff around again, that didn't make sense. I have to agree with Tom that it would make sense to have that information before we meet. I don't know, it sounds like. Okay. So you feel the geotech won't affect anything? Water table, right, so the water table is. It wouldn't affect the placement of fields or buildings or anything like that?
It's more of a.
Just because we are reporting this, I don't know what we're talking about not to get picked up.
Sure. Makes sense.
We had a meeting, proposed on July 26th, and that's what I proposed last, I had
Is that a building meeting?
a building meeting. And because I thought that we'll have more reports available by then. I think we can maintain the wells work as well, the water table figured out by then. I don't know. It's just, yeah. If we want, if the desire was to completely have all the reports, including the water table, then it has to be August.
You could always have that meeting and then, present any new information that we have. Strategy.
Everybody's pleasure.
I think we originally had one scheduled for the 26th, you
I
said?
was, yes.
I'll leave that on. And, see if we can schedule a school committee meeting as soon as possible after that. Does that make sense, or do we need to go further?
Do they need to present to the full?
So, and that's why I was gonna ask the Perkins team is, because they're looking for our guidance on option A or option B. I correct me if I'm wrong.
We would love a sense of the body, which direction to go into. We don't need a, per se, a vote, but we would like to know so that the design team can
Yes.
go in one direction or the other direction.
I was just, either design may have certain things that I think would be tricky with running the middle school population through. One was the bottleneck area in the hallways.
I noticed that the smallest part is gonna be where the most traffic's going through. So I don't know if you're totally set on the JAGs in that way. And also the special education rooms within the grade areas. Currently, the way this school is running is that there is, associated with each team, there's a need for that extra room. So I don't know if you wanna go into details like that. I also have concerns about the distance that students would have to travel in the really long building to get to the cafeteria. And just if you're moving, 300, my group is 7th graders, that long of a distance, that's a lot of distance for them to, have some tricky situations. So that's just my piece. But I was gonna ask, I know that the other committee members who are the principals are not here today, so I feel like getting feedback from more the educators, because there's definitely some pieces moving, even 300 students within the hallway. It's tricky. I was anticipating that it would be almost pods within that hallway, and to see the science rooms here and students having to move through and cross paths with 200 other students, that's concerning. And then the 5th grade design, I like the pairing across the hallway, but I was under the kind of thought that it would almost be teams that maybe would be connected even directly. So it's just my initial feedback. Oh, actually, one more thing. The bathroom, having one large bathroom for approximately 300 students to use. Bathrooms are another area of concern. So I don't know if it's ever possible to do smaller divided bathrooms. So just some pieces of like the reality of living in that space. Thank you.
So I guess the question is, do they need to come to the school committee then, first? Or is that what this next meeting at the end of July would be, to have a joint meeting with the school committee, label it as such, and do it then?
What does that do to your timeline as far as if you would keep this until July 26th?
Well, our intent, Mike, is to keep working, we'd rather work on one scheme because we have such a tight timeline, but if we have to work on both of them simultaneously, we can. I'd rather do one and really focus our energy on one, if at all possible.
So you're saying that you're looking for the building committee to make a recommendation on one of the two options?
I'd love, Ralph, to get a sense of the body of what direction you want to go in, but I understand that if you need more time, you need to take more time. It's probably the most important decision that's got to be made.
Is a copy of your presentation available to us to look at?
It will be.
Yeah, okay.
It will be. There's a couple of typos.
Good, thanks.
Oh, they fixed them. We'll get it.
Again, I don't think, I just don't know if there's anybody who has a feeling on the committee regarding giving them an option this evening. And I can tell you my opinion, but I'll wait to hear yours.
I don't think it makes sense to make a choice tonight. We literally just been handed these two options. I'd like to have the slants, I'd like to share them with the school committee. And yeah, I appreciate the input that you just offered. But I have an opinion about which one I like more, but I'd also like to know if there's a way to open up that space a little bit more on the athletic field. How we can do that.
So that's why I thought maybe 2 weeks meeting will give people time to review these, and then the recommendation can be made. Maybe we can't solve all the problems in 2 weeks, but at least the layout of the building, because it's not fair to ask you to vote on the recommendation, but look at it in 2 weeks.
I know this is a little more than 2 weeks, what I'll recommend, and again, if you think it's too long, please let me know. I recommend that if there's a conflict in someone on the board, let me know also, that we push it up a week and schedule a meeting for July 19th of the building subcommittee. That we invite the school committee and ask them if they consider having this as a joint meeting of the building committee and the school committee. I think that's a great idea for you who just said it, so it's not my idea. But if they're willing to do that as joint committee of the building and the school committee, that's up to them. And then, and again, and I'm hoping this helps you in your deliberations. I'm only one member of many, but we need a new middle school more than anything. And I can tell you, as just one member of this committee, I wouldn't in good conscience vote for either option. I could not spend $107 million knowing that we're gonna have less field space, no baseball, no soccer, no track, nothing, for 1,200 kids. I would vote no on either. So I just wanna let you, I'm just one member, and I wanna thank you for your work, but it's not your fault. You've been handing the hand of cards here. They dealt the bad hand of cards, and I agree. I mean, they said that I didn't even read what Tom just wrote, and that's even more glaring, that they said they didn't have any kind of hazards here. So, but hopefully.
I didn't write it, I read it.
Exactly. But hopefully by July 19th, I'll feel a little better. So.
To have a meeting on the 19th of July.
And request it to be a
joint meeting.
Yeah.
Just request, it's up to the school committee. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Yeah, they will.